Welcome to our noon edition of Arirang News. Here are the stories making the headlines at this hour. For the first time since last week's general elections, the South Korean government will make their latest announcement on where they stand over the medical standoff between them and trainee doctors. The government has reiterated that it wants to expand med school slots from next year, but doctors remain adamant against this decision, refusing to come back to their posts. President Yoon visited the April 19th National Cemetery to pay respects to those who lost their lives during the country's first pro-democracy movement in 1960. Scores of demonstrators, mainly students, died in the April 19th revolution, which eventually led to the resignation of then-President Syngman Rhee. Israeli missiles have reportedly struck a site in Iran as their first move of retaliation. That's according to ABC News. Iran's foreign news agency reported that an explosion was heard near an airport in the Iranian city of Isfahan, but the cause hasn't been disclosed. For the first time since last week's general elections, the South Korean government is to speak about the ongoing healthcare crisis later in the afternoon. We've seen many challenges spur from junior doctors' mass walkout and professors' collective resignations, all in protest of the government's drive to expand medical admission slots from next year. Kim Jung-sil starts us off.
The government is speaking on the issue of the ongoing healthcare crisis for the first time since last week's general election. The meeting on Friday will be organized by the Central Disaster and Safety Countermeasures Headquarters and chaired by the Prime Minister's office. Likely to be discussed is the Presidential Healthcare Reform Task Force. This social consultation has been set up to discuss the remaining challenges for the reform. The presidential office said the task force could be launched as early as next week. It will have around 20 members, including health ministry officials, groups of doctors, nurses, pharmacists, and patients. On Thursday, Health Minister Cho Kyu-hong said that healthcare reform is a necessary task to protect the lives of the people, re-emphasizing the government's unwavering intention to complete the reform. The government is also speeding up its process to legalize physician assistant nurses amid fierce opposition from doctors. Meanwhile, school presidents from 6 universities proposed accepting only half of the government's quota increase for next year. If the government accepts, the medical student quota would be increased by 1,000 places rather than the government's target of 2,000 extra spots. It's been exactly 2 months since junior doctors nationwide started to submit collective resignations opposing the government's plan to increase the medical student quota by 2,000 next year. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
President Yoon paid his respects to those who lost their lives during the April 19th revolution in 1960, pledging to build on their devotion to liberal democracy. On Friday, the South Korean leader visited the April 19th National Cemetery and offered a moment of silence and prayer for those who died in the student-led movement. Yoon also briefly met with their bereaved family members. The April 19th revolution is considered one of South Korea's first pro-democracy movements, which led to the resignation of then-President Syngman Rhee, in the same month. Leading up to the fateful day, students across the country had been rising up against his authoritarian regime and clashed with police who fired into the crowds, killing scores of demonstrators. South Korea's finance minister has spoken up about various economic issues facing the country, including high consumer prices and the unstable current exchange market. Finance Minister Choi Sang-mok, speaking to press in Washington, D.C. on Thursday, highlighted stable core inflation, but noted challenges with fluctuating prices, particularly for agricultural goods. He discussed plans to mitigate the impact of global warming on fruit prices next year and emphasized prioritizing people's livelihoods over addressing the economic downturn. Regarding the currency exchange market, he gave assurances that the government is closely monitoring the strong greenback against the Korean won and has contingency plans in place. A modified grain bill that mandates the government to buy surplus rice, which the president has earlier vetoed, was directly put to a plenary meeting on Thursday. Lee Si-hoo reports.
The National Assembly's opposition-controlled Agriculture Committee on Thursday directly referred to a plenary session a contentious bill requiring the government to respond to the steep rise in falling grain prices. 11 main opposition Democratic Party committee members and 1 independent voted in favor. They were all those present of the 19-member committee, as 7 ruling People Power Party members had walked out in protest. The revision to the Grain Management Act prompts the government to take active measures to stabilize prices of grain, mainly rice, to help farmers. Such measures include purchasing surplus grain or selling a government-managed inventory of grains. The bill was referred to the Legislation Committee for discussion back in February according to customary procedures. But parliamentary rules also state that a bill pending in the Legislation Committee for more than 60 days can be directly referred to a plenary session if over 3/5 of the original standing committee members agree. This is how the opposition-controlled Agriculture Committee was able to push through the referral of the bill, slightly modified after its original version was vetoed by the president last year. President Yoon rejected the bill in April of 2023, saying that the compulsory purchase of surplus rice using taxpayers' money is not in any way helpful for farmers. A year has passed since, and the PPP against the bill then and now says that a mandatory purchase will lead to even greater production of surplus grain in the long term. The PPP members of the Agriculture Committee released a statement after their walkout Thursday, prompting the DP to join them in coming up with what they call a reasonable alternative. They called the opposition's move a legislative flood in defiance of parliamentary law. The DP members of the committee, too, held a press conference and reiterated the need for a revision, saying that the fluctuating price of grains is threatening farming operations. They said their single-handed referral was necessary for the speedy passing of the bill, while not much time is left for the current assembly. The Agriculture Committee directly referred 4 additional bills to the plenary session on Thursday, including one establishing a legal basis for the founding of a Chamber of Agriculture and Fisheries for those in the sector to voice their opinions. It's expected the bills will be handled by the current 21st National Assembly during its final extraordinary session next month. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
Following Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's warning that Israel will make its own decisions when responding to Iran's weekend airstrikes, an explosion was heard near the Iranian city of Isfahan. Several Iranian nuclear sites are located here and work as a centerpiece of Iran's uranium enrichment program. While the ABC cited a U.S. official saying that it was Israeli missiles, Iran's news agencies have not yet identified the exact cause of the explosion. Iran has warned Israel that any attack on its nuclear facilities will mean tit-for-tat measures, and that it could also step up its development of nuclear weapons. Lee Seung-jae explains more.
With the armed conflict in Gaza still ongoing after more than 6 months, and Iran and Israel on the brink of a full-blown conflict, tensions in the Middle East continue to rise with each day. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps on Thursday warned that it would target Israel's nuclear sites and may pursue the development of nuclear weapons if Israel strikes Iran's nuclear facilities. The stern warning from Tehran comes after Israeli officials promised a response to Iran's attacks on Israel last Saturday. It's also Iran's most direct warning that it could abandon its policy of refraining from building a nuclear weapon. Currently, Iran is enriching uranium up to 60%, a short technical step away from the more than 90% enrichment needed for an atomic bomb. Over at the UNSC, the United States vetoed a resolution to stop the United Nations from recognizing a Palestinian state, a move which denied the Palestinian Authority full membership of the world body. The move by the U.S. was also echoed by a U.S. State Department official.
We also have been very clear consistently that premature actions in New York, even with the best intentions, will not achieve statehood for the Palestinian people.
He added that such a move at the UN would statutorily require the United States to cease its funding to the UN. This marks the second Palestinian attempt to become the 194th member of the UN. Meanwhile, a planned ground offensive in Rafah may be imminent following a meeting between U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Israel's security officials. While Washington has expressed its concern over a possible offensive in the southern tip of Gaza due to risks to a large refugee population there, the two sides shared the goal of defeating Hamas. The two sides agree that a ground offensive in the region is necessary in order to completely eliminate the Palestinian militant group. A local Arab media outlet reported that the U.S. government accepted the Israeli military's plan for the Rafah ground operation on the condition that Israel does not retaliate against Iran's airstrike. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Over in Ukraine, another drone attack was attempted on Thursday at the Russian-held Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Russian-installed officials at the nuclear power plant reported the attack. They said it had been less than 2 weeks since previous similar attacks and that Ukraine was behind the latest incident. The International Atomic Energy Agency said no damage or injuries have been reported, but warned that whoever is behind these incidents is ignoring the international calls for restraint. Ukraine hasn't commented on the latest drone attack yet, but has completely denied any involvement in previous incidents. An official at the International Monetary Fund has said exchange rate volatility won't present significant economic challenges to South Korea. During a press briefing in Washington on Thursday, IMF's Director for Asia and Pacific Department, Krishna Srinivazan, called on policymakers in South Korea not to overly focus on what moves the U.S. central bank will take, citing limited currency mismatches and manageable possible inflation. A currency mismatch refers to one in the currency composition of assets and liabilities, where assets are denominated in domestic currencies and liabilities in foreign currency. Meanwhile, the official stressed that Seoul should focus on the domestic situation, including price stability, when asked what the country's central bank should do to preserve financial and economic stability. South Korea on Thursday celebrated the export of its 500th domestically built liquefied natural gas carrier. A naming ceremony for the vessel Orion Spirit, built by Samsung Heavy Industries, took place at the morning of Thursday at the company's Gov't shipyard in Gyeongsangnam-do province. The carrier will be delivered to its owner, U.S.-banked banking giant JP Morgan Chase, on Friday. This milestone was achieved exactly 30 years after Korea constructed its first LNG carrier in the year 1994. A declining population has brought many changes to the country, one of them being an increase in the number of homes that are vacant. Against this backdrop, abandoned homes are now going through a transformation. Lee Soo-jin has the story.
It's a small coffee shop within an alleyway in the central region of South Korea. A buzz of chatter travels through the air, even though it's a weekday, with most of it coming from this coffee shop. At first glance, it seems like your everyday coffee shop, but it was once an abandoned home. Originally built in the 1950s, the house had been left vacant for 13 years before the owner of the coffee shop decided to purchase and transform it into a space that people would find appealing. But he decided to renovate it in a way that would preserve its original form.
There are two types of architectural styles here. On this side, you can see elements of Japanese colonial architecture, and on the other side, modern Korean architecture.
South Korea has seen a surge in vacant homes from its declining population, with over 130,000 reported across the country as of 2022, nearly half of which are in rural areas. Because vacant homes tend to attract crime, there have been various efforts made by local governments to turn these into community assets. The local administration in Chungju, where this coffee shop is located, provides 10 million won, or around $7,000 in renovation grants for those who purchase vacant homes. The owner says these benefits and his own success story have encouraged others to purchase vacant homes, not just in this alleyway, but also in nearby areas.
The home vacancy rate stood at 50% 7 years ago. As of last year, it's at 10 to 12%.
Lee Jun-young is someone who bought a vacant home on a street 10 minutes away from the coffee shop.
Around 80 to 90% of my decision to purchase a vacant home was influenced by the success of the coffee shop.
He is now the owner of not just his own coffee shop, but also a guest house. Locals say that the atmosphere of the town has changed since these vacant homes were transformed.
Before, these streets felt run down, but now they have come alive again.
She added that she believes the town will continue to flourish as there are other vacant homes currently undergoing renovation. Business owners here say that an ability to see value in the old, as well as more monetary government support, are what will help not just this town but other areas across the nation with high home vacancy rates come alive again. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News, Chungju.
Dessert market trends in South Korea have been changing rapidly, especially because of the impact of social media. Some desserts went viral and gained sudden popularity, but were then forgotten about, leading to small businesses having to close down suddenly. Park Kwon-woo went out to find out more about this trend.
At South Korea's largest dedicated dessert market, more than 40 brands gather under one roof, selling a range of delightful treats. People began gathering in the mornings, sometimes even in long lines to choose their favorite desserts.
I spend about 14 to 21 US dollars a day on desserts, which is more than a meal. I usually get desserts that are pretty unpopular on social media.
With Korean consumers heavily influenced by social media, content creators have been introducing new dessert items that could drive new trends domestically.
I think food content creators are a big part of what makes these snacks go viral. And after they go on social media, there's a domino effect.
And with news trends surging rapidly, some desserts suddenly gain popularity before the hype dies down and the trend almost disappears. One example is the Chinese sugar-coated fruit snack, tanguru, that went viral last year. According to data from South Korea's Interior Ministry, around 60 tanguru stores had already closed between the start of 2024 and early April. In the whole of last year, a total of 72 stores across the country shut down. A search online shows posts from frustrated tanguru store owners saying that they are selling up. That's compared to the situation in 2023, when the popularity of tanguru resulted in the number of new stores jumping by over 1,300%. One expert explained the reason dessert trends changed so quickly in South Korea.
Due to high stress levels, people have a huge desire for desserts, and many of those have a wide but short trending term. Korean consumers are highly affected by others, so as soon as one item goes viral, it withers quickly afterward.
He also said people hoping to start a new business should think of the longevity of their products in terms of popularity in order to keep their stores open. Park Kwon-woo, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at the latest news in the world now. In the U.S. on Thursday local time, the 12 jury members in former President Donald Trump's historic criminal case in New York have been sworn in. New additions to the jury, an investment banker and a security engineer, were seated after 2 jurors were excused, one due to an impartiality issue and the other over suspicions the juror may have lied about having a criminal history. The case revolves around a payment of hush money made to a porn star during the 2016 presidential campaign. This is the first criminal trial for a former American president, and it represents a significant challenge to his efforts to regain the Oval Office. It's expected that jury selection for 6 alternates will conclude on Friday, and the judge presiding over the case has predicted that opening arguments will commence on Monday. Kenya's highest-ranking military officer has died in a helicopter crash. The country's President William Ruto announced in a news conference that General Francis Omondi Ogola was among the 10 people who died in the crash in western Kenya on Thursday. 2 people survived the helicopter crash, which occurred shortly after takeoff. The Kenya Air Force has dispatched an air investigation team to the site to figure out the cause of the crash. Ogola left Nairobi on Thursday to inspect school renovations and visit troops in the North Rift region. President Ruto convened an urgent Security Council meeting following the crash. Kenya will observe 3 days of mourning starting on Friday for Ogola, who is the first Kenyan military chief to die while in active service. Google fired 28 workers late Wednesday following their protest this week against the company's $1.2 billion cloud computing contract with the Israeli government. Investigations revealed that the protesting employees disrupt work at several U.S. office locations, including Google Cloud CEO Thomas Kurian's office. A company spokesperson said the protests were part of a long-standing campaign by a group of organizations and individuals who are largely unrelated to the company, and that the company will continue to investigate and take action as needed. The contract, known as Project Nimbus, involves Google and Amazon providing cloud computing services to the Israeli government and military. Bristol University's robotics scientists have developed a robotic suction cup that can grasp rough, curved, and heavy stones. The research team examined the adaptive suction abilities of octopus suckers, which allow them to anchor themselves to rocks. The findings were published on April 18th in the journal Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Now the researchers are aiming to use sensors inside the cups to make the suckers smarter and enable machines with many suckers to be deployed for industrial purposes. Choi Ji-hee, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. Air quality levels improved to their normal levels in central regions, but east of Gangwon-do and southern provinces will need to stay alert against high levels of yellow dust again. Then it should be as warm as yesterday in most parts. Seoul topping out at 24, early summer-like in Daegu and Gyeongju at 28 and 29 degrees Celsius under sunny skies in most places. Then there's much needed nationwide rain in the forecast this weekend, starting from Jeju and the south coast early tomorrow. Rain should help to clear the lingering dust in the air, but also bring down the highs. Now, the further south will see heavier rainfall with thunderstorms and strong winds on the south coast and Jeju. And this band of rain will continue into Sunday morning. We are already heading into the end of April. Next week looks more promising with more wide temperature gaps between lows and highs. With that in mind, let's take a look at the international weather conditions.
That's all we have for you at this hour. We'll bring you more updates at the same time next week.